Hello and welcome to another episode of PPC Town Hall. My name is Fred Valles. I'm your host. I'm also the CEO and co-founder at Optimizer, a PPC management software. So today on the show, we have Joe Dries from Microsoft, and he's going to walk us through Q4 holiday preparedness. Q4 is obviously the biggest quarter for a lot of advertisers, a lot of retail, and the time to get ready becomes earlier and earlier every year. Personally, I've already bought a Halloween decor in August, and I know Halloween is technically not a big holiday in Q4, but it sort of goes to show that summer's not even over, and I've already bought something for many months into the future. So that's a consumer behavioral shift. We're going to hear from Joe what Microsoft is seeing when it comes to consumer behavior shifts. We're obviously going to talk about Copilot and all of the AI efforts that Microsoft is doing, and just hopefully give you some actionable advice to get you ready for a hugely successful Q4 holiday shopping season. So, with that, let's get rolling with another episode of PPC Town Hall. Hey, Joe, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Oh, hey, Fred. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Thank you again.
So, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do at Microsoft.
So I'm a 10-year Microsoftie, also a boomerang, but I've been in the industry going on, I don't want to age myself, but 21 years now. I've worked at a couple startups. I've worked at companies like Axiom, which is also inclusive of LiveRamp, Datarama, Oracle. So quite frankly, this is all I've ever really done since I kind of stepped foot out of college, and happy to be here and share some of the current updates within Microsoft and what we're seeing for this holiday season, but also potentially, some of the knowledge I've picked up along the way. And of course, love getting your feedback as well as one of the more kind of engaged and active CEOs in our industry.
Yeah, it's what I love doing most is be engaged and not just lead the company, but also think about the future. So I recently added a dinosaur to my studio here because kind of one of the points we want to get into is how do none of us as humans become the dinosaurs of the industry by figuring out how to work with all these newfangled tools and generative AI and all of these major shifts in consumer behavior that are frankly being driven by what's happening with Gen AI and just the way that people search is really changing, right? So really happy to have you on and hear from you. And you're a solutions engineer as well, or a solution specialist. So we love it when people bring solutions, not just problems or random thoughts. But let's put this into practice and figure out what we can actually go and do later today to make the most of where we're at.
Love it. Love it.
So with that, let's just jump straight into it. Microsoft obviously has a lot of data, and you as a company can see quite a bit about where the shifts are happening. You've made a major investment, and you keep investing in generative AI. So let's start with that, right? As we think about going into Q4, how's the consumer going to be different this year from years past?
Yeah, I think as we've matured in this industry, the idea that the customer journey is anything close to linear, we've kind of thrown that out the window, right? So one of the things we're really trying to focus on this year is the idea that as a brand or a small business, you've kind of got this opportunity to kind of like not necessarily dictate the engagements, but you have the ability to stay somewhat in like a consistent harmony or orchestration. So one of the things we're really focused on too is not going too crazy in terms of like doing anything different for holidays. In fact, a lot of the recommendations we have are things we would recommend, you do from, your first onset on our platform. But what we want to do is we want to take advantage of the fact that the consumer is research heavy, right? They're price conscious more than ever. May stem from an initial brand or product search to how do I keep in touch with a consumer who showed signals, right, that they were interested in my brand. And we have a couple of products that do help facilitate that. One, of course, is traditional web-based remarketing. But for those really savvy and heavy into retail, it's things like shopping on MSAM, where you leverage your retail feed in a more display oriented fashion and leverage that logic of what did that consumer do with a particular product or SKU within your feed. So again, the journey can be 3 months, 3 weeks, but the idea is you want to have a solution in place that allows you to engage at the most kind of critical times.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so, one piece of research that was put out by Microsoft, and we'll put the playbook in the show notes here that anyone can grab. But one piece of research has to do really with how early consumers are starting to shop for Q4 and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. And so, obviously, it's not Black Friday when they start shopping, right? A lot of these interactions in that non-linear consumer journey happen as early uh, for a lot of people in September. Obviously, it happens before then as well for some people, but we really start to see the needle moving in September. And then in October, it's like full steam ahead. And in fact, it's interesting, Amazon just announced their latest Prime deal days, which now seem to happen every couple of weeks. But again, early October, and that sort of speaks to the fact that that is going to be when consumers are starting to shop. So talk a little bit more about what your data may have shown as far as how early the consumer is engaging.
Yeah, and it starts now. So, in criticality, I think is more of a kind of a like a better buzz term that we could add to this, which is you don't have to have everything up and running by the middle of September, but by the end of September, you should have your strategy in place, right? You should have gone through sort of what do you have already in flight, what's delivering results. And quite frankly, we just had a meeting with a partner. And one of the things we did in conjunction with, the insights provided by our vertical team, we took their own data, right? And kind of showcased the work you're already doing today is really delivering results. So let's amplify that. How can we rinse and repeat with other accounts where maybe there's a gap in terms of a specific product that, again, for retail vertical probably should be in place. And then again, it really is all about having that strategy ready to go. So when people do perform brand searches, when they do engage with your ad, when they do land on that website, but maybe they didn't check out, you're building those audience pools. You're getting those signals brought back into the platform. And to your point on AI and what does that do for the customer, or excuse me, the advertiser? I mean, one of the biggest things we're doing is we're improving our algo, right? Relevancy and customer experience is so important to us. And, that orchestration can be done in a really thoughtful way without bombarding a user with, we'll just say, unrelevant ads or maybe something that they're not interested in. But again, we can pick up those signals and really make sure we're only engaging with customers that have shown interest in your offering.
Yeah, and I love that. Be thoughtful in how you approach customers because nobody likes to be spammed or see
Right.
messages that just don't apply to them. And that's always been one of the frustrations with remarketing is that there's no real signal as far as, yeah, okay, I've gone and purchased this thing from someone else, so please stop showing me ads for it. And that's what generative AI in some form is good at, right? It understands kind of that you're no longer interested in this sort of thing, but it also, as it builds up to you shopping for something, it understands a lot of context about the traits and attributes and value propositions that matter to you. And what's really interesting is that we've been so conditioned to think about keywords as the main signal of how someone expresses intent. And then you have demographic signals, which are useful, but
Right.
they don't really let you look deeply into the soul of the consumer, which Gen AI to some degree does because it's no longer about typing stuff on the screen. It's a voice assistant. I've got the Chat GPT app on my phone. You got Copilot where you can talk to it. And so one piece of research that Microsoft put out was the click-through rate is much improved when the ad shows in the generative experience as opposed to the non-generative experience. And that kind of proves the fact that through all of this signal that's coming in, that's not really just keywords. Gen AI knows exactly what it is you're going to want. That does raise some questions then for advertisers. I mean, how do we target in this case if it's not really purely keywords anymore?
Yeah, and actually, I think this will play nicely to a comment you made, which is when a person actually makes that conversion or that shopping cart purchase, right? Which is our in market audiences do rely heavy on keywords. They also rely heavily on keyword intent, right? Which is what am I trying to do? Am I researching best prices? Am I really in the beginning of it? But then two, because of our massive identity graph, which by the way is 99.9% ours, we are able to bring people in and out of audience segments based on activity, right? So I could be in the market for, a kitchen appliance for my mother-in-law, but at some point in time, I might actually convert and I might fall out of that in-market segment, right? So then the pool does change, but then you still have access to some of those folks who haven't converted. And of course, there's things we can do from a campaign perspective of excluding converters and changing some of the look back windows. But fundamentally, we're actually updating and optimizing our segments, our signals on a daily basis. And one of the things, from a talk track perspective, is it's somewhere around 20 billion digital signals are leveraged every single day in order to power our network. So this isn't this isn't rudimentary, right? This is a very complex algorithm that we're running across not just owned and operated, but extended through Xandr, right? So again, we've got scale, we've got the audience piece dialed, and the fact that we own a search engine is such a luxury, but at the same time, we own a browser too. Right, so it gives us flexibility, and it also gives us the again other activity and signals that you might not get from another platform.
And so for someone who's not quite as familiar maybe with Microsoft advertising options and is maybe a bit more Google first, talk a bit more about that identity graph and how much of it is just really purely driven by the data Microsoft already has, or what does the advertiser do to enhance sort of that identity graph picture?
Yeah, I think in general, like the more signals we have, the better our graph is, right? So, the graph is Microsoft owned and operated. If you think about our ecosystem from like a kind of a broader lens, I mean, they're massive platforms. MSN.com is obviously, one of the largest news sources, but Edge browser is also the number two browser. We are the PC, and obviously, we take privacy very seriously. But all of our consumer products are consumer and consumer alone. And one of the differentiations we make is, we'll use Outlook, for example. Outlook is enterprise, it's also consumer. So when you think about whether or not you are, is there anything happening in my corporate email? Absolutely not. So when you go through a pitch with Microsoft or you see numbers related to Outlook.com, those are purely consumer driven, right? So our signals are ours. They go through a very stringent privacy review. And in fact, sometimes it's a little frustrating for folks because they see the potential. But Microsoft is, safety and security first. And if that goes across the board in all business lines. But I think, leveraging first party data is another unique opportunity, whether it's through Xandr, whether it's through, partners like LiveRamp or through a UI. I mean, the ability to leverage first party data, I think is a really, it's a luxury, right? Not everybody has it, but I mean, we have more than enough opportunities to leverage first and third party data. And then of course you even have Xandr Curate and the data marketplace. So again, based on a use case or an objective, we really have, kind of a couple of opportunities where we can, take this, take that, mesh it together, and really have like a cohesive campaign, right? If we took your first party data, it could be a remarketing list or a lifetime value list, right? You want to find more folks who look like this certain subset of people, and we can take that and go find lookalikes across our network. So lots of opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. So a lot of different building blocks, and that's kind of what you were saying. Then is by the end of September, have your strategy in place for how these building blocks will fit together. Ideally, you've already started building your first party data, and you have those high value customers. But one of the benefits or the nice things here is that's kind of internal to your database, right? That's what first party data means is you don't have to necessarily go and build it from scratch right now. That data probably already exists somewhere, and then it just becomes a matter of being able to match it back to a key that Microsoft basically has about that consumer. So I think that's all very interesting. And then another type of first party data I think is really relevant in Q4 is probably something like profit margin. So if you're a retailer, you're going to run an e-commerce campaign trying to sell stuff for gifts, then bid to profitability as opposed to bidding to ROAS. And a lot of people don't think about this, but your profit margin is your first party data, and that's another big lever that you can pull.
Yeah, another thing too, like when we talk about sort of the marketing maturity curve, when folks talk about full funnel omni-channel, the one thing that sometimes we have to spend a little time on is this notion of view through. I think everyone's so focused on direct conversions and same session conversions, which again, going all the way back to the initial part of our conversation, that doesn't happen very likely. So again, adding in sort of, I would say, a more kind of nuanced and kind of updated like attribution modeling in the back end, which you can also get from our UI, will also help. And then something that I think is also really critical when we just talk about efficiencies outside of bidding strategies is one thing, Microsoft network is done on a CPC. So right out of the gate, we're already trying to make this media as efficient as possible. And then two, unlike some of our competitors, you're able to actually look in reporting and see where am I running, where am I getting not just clicks, but where am I also getting conversions? And to your point, I'm actually profitable from like a delivery and conversion perspective. So all of that goes into play, and we've got a ton of levers to pull. And so even when we start with folks from we'll say a new engagement perspective, we always start at the bottom of the funnel because we want that quick realization of value. So we're leveraging shopping feeds, we're leveraging remarketing, we're leveraging in market audience because it kind of does a little bit of the lower portion of the funnel plus consideration. And we think about feeding the top of the funnel, which also includes search, right? As much as we're talking about the audience network, search is at the top, search is at the bottom. And, to have that all going back to one user identity in the same network, like it's super powerful. There's a lot of insights that are available within the UI in addition to some of the additional stuff we can do on a unique advertiser level.
So talk us briefly through what does the setup look like for that to get that better view through attribution, the attribution across the various touch points that might happen across the audience network, as well as search. How does one set that up?
Yeah, and to be fair, the first step is pretty easy, right? Like literally going into reporting, adding new columns, and making sure you're leveraging all of the kind of the robust KPIs that we have in there. And then two, should you be working with, a Microsoft representative, there are things we can do outside of the platform. I actually call it like delivering value outside of the UI, where we can actually take a single advertiser and we can monitor and track and look at the performance over a certain time period and look at things like how did this full funnel solutioning improve brand search terms? How did it improve click-through rate and conversions? And what was the overall lift across the funnel? And then we can move on to things like customer journey mapping, right? Like what was the actual sort of click or engagement narrative that got this customer to become a customer or we'll say a member. So there's a lot of things we can do, but you can start within the UI and all of that reporting is available. You just gotta make a couple extra clicks because sometimes it's not as obvious as we would all hope.
That's right. And so that talks about the full funnel. What about going cross-platform and understanding the value? Because obviously people do go outside the Microsoft network as well. And that could be for something as simple as the time we all spend on social media. How do we also bring in connected TV? I know connected TV is an effort that Microsoft is going into, but you're not the only game in town for that one. So how do you look at that broader picture?
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, and again, step out, one network, multiple solutions, one identity graph, one version of Joe versus 10. So starting from search, going to display, and then connected TV, if you were to utilize a similar target across all of those, it's the same audience, right? You're not buying in a disparate fashion. Our CTV offering actually came through the Xandr acquisition, so we got access to a real robust premium setup that you can deploy from the UI. So whether you're a media buyer at an agency or a small business, I mean, you could today go and launch a global CTV campaign across publishers like Disney Plus, Peacock, Hulu, Roku. Netflix is potentially part of that inventory supply beyond just direct buys. So it's a very robust platform. The reporting, again, is all in the UI, and it really is all about sort of being able to articulate the value across the funnel while still making sure that you're getting those KPIs that everyone kind of sets in the beginning. And similar to kind of the native display side, where am I getting the most run, right? Am I getting a higher completed view on a certain platform? Am I getting junk, not junk, spending dollars on placements or streaming services that I may not want to be on? Or if you said, hey, Joe, I've already got a direct deal with Hulu. Well, we can exclude that right from the jump. So again, we're really focused on value and efficiency. And again, just like our network, we're going on cost per completed view. So again, we want that media to be as valuable as possible right out of the gate.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. So you offer a lot of reporting into where your dollars are being spent, and then you can connect that to the actual production of those dollars and make exclusion decisions where it makes sense. Now, all of this connected TV, it does sound very exciting, but it also sounds difficult and expensive. Who is this for? Like, what's sort of the minimum monetary commitment, as well as how good does your creative need to be, and how do we get those creatives?
Yeah, great question. Creative does come up. Not a lot of folks have access. They don't have the budget. But I will say, if you're running on YouTube or if you're running with any other streaming platforms, those assets should carry over nicely to ours. We do have a scoring system. So in the event you're doing, we'll say you want to run on Netflix, it would go through a review where someone would actually rate the quality of the video, and depending on how good it is, it would or would not serve. But yeah, all assets, assuming they're decent bit rate. We also, of course, Microsoft advertising, you can find all the details there, or get with your rep. But again, there's no fees. You can do it through the UI with support from us or on your own. The pricing is cost per completed view, which again, very friendly and very, I will say, price conscious right out of the gate. And we don't necessarily have any budget minimums, except for there are daily minimums, which I believe it's like $20 a day or $25 a day. So again, not an overwhelmingly, aggressive requirement to get in the door and test it.
So it sounds like the biggest hurdle then potentially is that the creative component. But I've seen some really interesting uses of generative AI. So tools like Canva combined with Suno. Suno will generate a music track for you. You can obviously use something like DALI or Copilot, which is using OpenAI system, but you can use that to generate images. Then you can put those static images together in Canva. Canva will loop it into a video. It'll be backed with a audio track from Suno. You overlay some text, and basically you get a pretty high quality, obviously not professionally produced, but something that looks quite good that might
Right.
pass muster and be allowed onto CTV. So that's a way that people get into it. It's also, for me, it's really a way to kind of illustrate the vision. So you don't have to be a video producer to be able to show this is my vision for what the ad needs to look like. And then if you hit on something that you want to spend a bit more money and add a lot more production value, you can at least have something that's pretty well defined that the team can start working on.
Yeah, and as you know, with our partnership with OpenAI, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity in flight now that you can leverage, and at the same time, it's a growing partnership. So I would say stay tuned on potential, solutions that Microsoft can offer to our customers where maybe creative is a roadblock. So stay tuned on that one.
Yeah, no, and obviously, I mean, OpenAI has shown us early previews of what video generation looks like, and it's quite exciting. I think we've all seen hamsters riding bicycles in downtown Manhattan. And so that's the kind of stuff. Hey, it would have taken millions of dollars of production budget and CGI to achieve, but now it's going to be available soon to everyone. So quite excited to see how Microsoft fits into that, and maybe some of the different angles that you take based on the fact that you understand the advertising audience quite well.
Oh, okay. No, I was just going to say it is, as a technologist, one of the first things I do ask when, something's new to market or, we'll say a new startup is, coming out of stealth, which is, does this make humanity better? Right. And even if it's something as little as helping a small business create video assets, like in my heart, in my head, that tech is making, humanity a little bit better, right? Giving them the ability to, get into a solution that again could be cost prohibitive just from assets. So it is really. I'm optimistic about it. Some of it's already accessible, but things like that really do make me bullish about how AI can actually make things better for the humans here.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's super useful if you use it and deploy it in the right way. But we keep going back to this quote. Sam Altman says 95% of marketers will lose their job within 5 years due to Gen AI kind of doing that work for them. And that's a big theme of this show nowadays is what do we then do as humans? How do we not become those 95%, but how are we the 5%? So for you and your technologist vision, what does that look like? What should we be doing?
Yeah, I think for me, like one thing that I'm not giving up is this notion of creativity. So I know, Copilot can write a really amazing email for me, but as a human, like I want to leverage what, those skills that I have. I think, staying educated too, right? Like, it's one of those things where, we talk about leaning in, and especially when maybe it's not like the bright, maybe it's a little scary. I mean, leaning into those opportunities is where growth comes from. So for me, I actually don't mind, the challenges. I don't mind those moments where I'm like, gosh, I don't know anything about this. And what does that actually mean, right? Like, I don't have an opinion because I don't know enough. So I will say it is on a faster acceleration than I thought it would be. But there's quite a few areas where you do need a human, where you do need that human sort of, compassion and maybe even grace, right, in order to make sure that the product that's driven by AI is actually human forward. But it is super interesting. It's moving at a rate that I didn't expect. And hopefully it really does just take over mundane, redundant tasks, right? Like data wrangling, and there's already some great platforms out there that remove that. But yeah, I'd like to think that the creativity piece will still need us humans, and of course the human to human component for really important partnerships, right? Like those that won't go to machines. So I feel good there.
Yeah, and I think you also said like personal growth and leaning into knowing what's happening, and that's another way that Gen AI really helps, right? It sort of frees you up from the mundane tasks, like you said, and so that gives you time to become better educated. But don't just educate yourself in the traditional way; just explore entirely new things because GPT is a great teacher, and it can ask you questions, and it can sort of distill very complex information at different levels. So you could be like, "Hey, explain to me what media mix models are at for a 5 year old." Okay, I got it. Okay, now explain it to me like I was a 10 year old. Oh, okay, I'm following. And so, if that's how you like to learn, great. If you like to learn a different style, you just tell GPT how to teach you about this concept that you've been wanting to go deeper on. And then you can even ask it, hey, can you now ask me some questions like quiz me? Do I understand it? You always have to be a little cautious about the hallucinations that come up, but the more that you can also point it to, okay, here's like the reference material on this topic. So when I write things about PPC, I will often give it help articles from Microsoft or from Google because it's like this is grounding you in the reality of how, say, a performance max campaign would work. And then you can start learning about that. And so, but that applies broadly to anything. And then for myself, I'm also seeing this as an opportunity to become better at scripting. I love scripting, but it takes a lot of time. I'd rather be thinking about new solutions and be creative in that regard as opposed to actually writing the code. But I also want to become better at statistics, and so now it's helping me learn marketing statistics and get to a level that I couldn't get to before because of time limitations. And so I'm super excited about all of this as well.
Yeah, and I think also too the notion of evolving kind of has probably a lot of components, but I think one of them could be curious, right? So it's when you perform a search, you get that information back. Like, don't just copy and paste. Like that's easy, right? But what does this mean? What did it say? And do I even agree with? And does it make sense? And then two, I think application is really important. One of the things I started doing really early in my career is whether it was a new product, solution, something coming to the industry, it was I should go test run this and see how it not only lands, but like I need to form an opinion. And if you're just regurgitating something you read, or if you're just emailing copy and paste, like you're not really learning. And so I think those are really a couple components, at least for me, I'm going to be mindful of, because yeah, I mean, what was it? You can't always believe what you read, but you can take certain pieces of it. You can add some of those critical insights. Again, maybe you didn't have access to. Add that to your toolbox and continue to formulate your opinion and your POV, because again, that is in an AI driven world, that is something that makes us distinct, which is our opinions are based on more than just binary, right? There's things like your compassion, nostalgia, the outputs of joy, right? Like those things all go into the decisions we make.
Right. And that's also where I think you spoke about the human connection. And I think that's important because as you go to conferences, as you speak to people, you start hearing like what are their real pain points. And now you can frame your conversations with Gen AI and how you educate yourself in terms of those pain points. Like, so, okay, I've heard from a lot of advertisers, they struggle with, how to manage budgets in a more real time fashion, especially when the velocity is really high at certain times of the year. Okay, well, let me go and talk to GPT and figure out is there a scripting solution that could deal with that specific problem? And there's also this notion that GPT and generative, it's going to be generic if you speak to it in generic terms. But the more that you can box it in and give it limitations, it's going to actually get more creative about the ways that it proposes solutions. And so I think what those constraints are, that can come from the humans, that comes from your personal creativity, but it also comes from you having talked to many other people and having sort of digested that into, okay, well, a lot of people have told me about this budget problem, but they also tell me they don't want to spend $1 million on a solution. So that's a constraint that I can put in right there. And so generative is going to come back with something that's more likely to not be highly expensive, because one easy solution would be, well, hire 1,000 people who do nothing else but check for this. Okay, but that's out because that's too expensive. And so these are really interesting ways to work with AI that I think we're all sort of evolving into understanding, and making our lives better through that.
Yeah, an interesting point too. You said work with AI. Something I'm actually been conscious of is I perform a query, I now look at what does it truncate my query down to. There's a lot of, I think we're used to being a very like literature and kind of verbose society, right? Whereas AI and search is like it's efficiency. It's what is the actual what should the actual query look like? So I've been really paying attention to that, like. And if it doesn't change it too much, I'm like, oh, that was a good query I just did. At the same time, I had this notion of like, is it teaching me now how to communicate with it, right? Because it's showing me what my original query was, what it turned it into, and then the results. So I do think there's this mutual learning curve that's happening, and it's really interesting.
Very fascinating. Tell me, what is your favorite, maybe unusual application? And it doesn't have to be directly related to marketing, but like what one way do you think is very cool that you've used Gen AI?
Oh, actually, this is an authentic moment. This is vulnerable. I'm a big music guy. So as my son, we go to a lot of concerts, and I actually use Bing Image Creator to create my cover art for my Spotify playlist. And I have a good friend who's former Olympian. He's brilliant, and I made one in kind of his, it's like, capitalizing or sort of composing all of like his key attributes. And he was like, "This is so cool." And I was like, "Yeah, being image creator." So that for me is actually really cool. Now, to your point, the squirrels driving cars does come up, but again, I can't do it. I think it's also really fun, and when you get something that like is exactly what you're looking for, it feels really good. So Spotify cover art is my thing.
Yeah. I've done cover art for songs that my 5-year-old composed using Suno about our two cats. And it just like once you start putting all of these little pieces together, it's amazing because now the only reason that she's not a published musician on Spotify is that I haven't bothered to buy the music registration, the ISBN, I think.
Yeah.
But of course, GPT explained to me what I needed to do to get it published on Spotify, and we got the cover art, we got the songs. They're pretty catchy. So like, hey, my 5-year-old is a musician. Couldn't imagine that before.
The royalties are coming sooner.
Pennies a day, pennies a day. We're gonna be pennionaires. All right, let's shift it back to a little bit of digital marketing. So we've talked about the shift in consumer behavior. We haven't really talked much about what are people searching for in this economy. Is there like it used to be buy online, pick up in store. BOPIS used to be big, and then free shipping. That was the thing a couple of years ago. Like, are we seeing anything new that we should focus on in this holiday season?
Yeah, I think there's a big shift to not only competitive pricing and deals, but we are seeing the buy now pay later opportunities kind of come up. And again, those are third party companies that power that, the Sezzles, the Afterpays, the Klarnas of the world. But it is something that within sort of the user flow, if that's something you have as part of your e-commerce offering or playbook, it is something that you should definitely elevate. But folks are price conscious. I think there's a couple ways to go about it, which is, of course, you've got to be competitive. Everyone has margins. So there's this idea of getting as many conversions and kind of early in the process as you can. And then as, again, the time goes along, maybe begin to start introducing coupon codes, maybe start introducing price drops, or for that matter, these opportunities for buy now, pay later. Maybe that's something, it was been on your list to consider, but maybe by October you just decided I need this up and running because this holiday season is so critical. So we are seeing an uptick in that. And then from a conversion standpoint, I haven't seen quite a bit of like, it's not that it's linear, but to your point, when we get into Cyber 5 or we get into the real crunch time, again, you have all these signals and data that have taken place over the course of weeks and months. And by the time that comes, you should be in an opportunity to really see the kind of the results of all your work. So if you have your signal and trigger based solutions running, that's fantastic. If someone's been able to come through, but maybe you only got an email from them, I think that's time where you rely on your email and marketing automation, right? If you have that set up to still engage with the customer, or output a file, bring it to our platform, and maybe make a very unique and specific offer to those folks where you did earn the right to get the email address, but now you want to still get that sale. So I think there's a lot of opportunity this holiday season to have a better year than last year potentially.
Let me play devil's advocate here. So, great advice.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do all of these things in my Google Ads account, and then I'll be done. Uh, why should we do it on Microsoft? And I think the answer on search is pretty straightforward, right? Like a lot of people might be capped out on search volume on Google. Microsoft obviously has a fantastic search product with a lot of the same similar settings, even some additional settings. So that kind of makes sense. But for someone who's investing on the Google Display Network, which in essence is a bottomless pit, you can put as much money in there, and there's always going to be inventory available. Why should they do the extra work to start thinking about the Microsoft Audience Network as an additional play?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. The reasons why, I'll start off with one. So even if you move past the notion of scale, which Google has and we have, there is an unduplicated audience. So whether you're on Pinterest, Amazon, YouTube, Google, Facebook, there are folks who are on our platform that are not on theirs. Secondarily, you can think of this as creating a new revenue stream. Don't think of this as just, more work and more time out of your day. If you're not running on us, there is a certain subset of folks you're not getting in front of. So think about this as maybe creating a new revenue stream for your company. And then sort of like, all right, you got me. I feel like there's a unique opportunity. We do have solutions and tools in place to make that really easy. So something like Google Import or if you use the what's it called, editor tool, or if you're an API company, you can plug those in really quickly. So the value is there, and if you want to get the question out of the gate of us versus Google is massive. You kind of covered that with the notion of bottomless pit and the inability to hit budgets. We're not as big as Google, and outside of Facebook, I don't know who is, but we do typically have the most ROI we'll say ROI centric campaigns. We have typically more efficiency. Our CPAs are typically lower than that of Google. So yes, you get the fire hose over here, but as we talked about before, we're really focused on delivery of value, and we want that to be a quick realization of value, right? So scale, unduplicated audience, a savvy audience. And if you think about our audience in general, it's no different than what Microsoft's known for, which is the PC. So the PC, the workday consumer, affluent, it all boils down to a very efficient network where you typically see really good results from your retail campaigns.
Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love more revenue? So I like that angle. And
Yeah.
then as far as the easy button, so yes, obviously there's the campaign import.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I would advocate, and I think you would advocate too, for once it's been imported, you can just keep re-importing it. But ultimately, the best results are going to come if you look at Microsoft as a separate entity than Google, and you put in place the unique rules that optimize each platform to the best of their ability. That's also where my company Optimizer comes in, right? So we can take some of the rules that are maybe data driven or semantic analysis using generative AI to make different decisions between the two platforms so they can start diverging towards the best optimized version for each of the platforms. So it doesn't have to be hugely time consuming. You can make it as time consuming as you wish. But obviously, that big revenue opportunity that exists should be the primary decision factor. Do talk a little bit, because we have an international audience, and Microsoft is often criticized for maybe not being as big in European countries, but they've been growing, right? And then when it comes to the display network or the audience network, as well as connected TV, how does that look like internationally?
Yeah, that's a great question. And at first and foremost, I mean, I think the easiest thing to say is we are global. So, if you look at CTV, if you look at just our owned and operated, I mean, there's MSN.com, ES, DE, right? These are all region specific, websites and platforms and publishers. Xandr is, of course, and this might be helpful too. Today, whether you access what we call MAP, the Microsoft advertising platform, via the UI or API or third-party tool, you do get the ability or have the ability to extend through Xandr. So book in our platform, leverage all the in-market and the robust targeting suite that we have, but at the same time extend to all our additional publishers and partners that are part of our supply. And then globally, if you're moving from North America to Canada and maybe, potentially Japan, we have the insights and details for all these markets. So folks can consider, well, how am I going to launch this product across the globe, for these three major platforms, Google, Microsoft, and we'll say Facebook. So we definitely have all that information, available. And you can run it all from one UI. So again, when you talk about the investment of time and effort to be able to launch globally in a single interface, like that's a big deal. And the markets do vary in terms of the size and scale. But I haven't had too much pushback in terms of the actual opportunity, right? Like we had to do a little bit of, compelling, groundwork in the upfront, but once we get that rolling and we get started, typically folks are really happy with the results and they do want more. And so, we do have in-market efforts to improve, not just acquisition, but there's this idea of stickiness too. So keep making sure folks stay within our platform. User experience is huge for us. Whether you've had an editorial review, get stuck or denied, we do take it really seriously because it's hard. It's not only is it hard to get a new customer, you got to work on maintaining them, right, and keeping them happy and somewhat nurtured, right, and protected. So we take all of our markets with that same kind of mindset, and we just make sure that we're delivering relevant experiences that generate unique opportunities for the advertiser and the consumer.
Great. And so for someone listening to us today and who says now, okay, the Microsoft opportunity sounds ripe for the picking, let's go and do this in Q4. Do you have any final advice? Maybe let's just talk about bid management for a second, right? Because you're going to now invest a chunk of money into that. You did allude to the fact that it's a very ROI positive or good platform. But how would you recommend people set this up? Because Q4 does have these very spiky days, and everybody's, of course, concerned about blowing through the budget without the results. So how soon should people set it up? What's sort of the minimum number of conversions? And what bid strategies would you recommend?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think setup should be as soon as you're ready. So once you've made the decision, and that's actually something we really focus on, is not just selling things, but helping marketers make decisions. That's actually the biggest component of my job, is to make sure you have enough information to make a decision. From an attribution perspective, if you are a small company and you don't have a great third-party tool, recommend going with the UI. And when I say the UI, I mean making sure that you're actually going through adding the reporting KPIs and columns that are really important to you. At the same time, if you do work with a third-party tool, more than likely they do have access and modules for our platform, which can make it a whole lot easier. During the kind of the lead up to the holidays, we do find that folks typically do live in the UI at least to kick off, and then they start, working on the back end reporting to make sure, to your point, they're not just seeing the Google metrics, but they're also seeing Microsoft, they're seeing Facebook, and they're kind of looking at them as their own. Bid strategies, that's an interesting thing because I think out of the gate, a lot of folks start with eCPC. But again, if you have a very, very specific focus on your return on your investment, there is an opportunity to look at like ROAS. We do also have predictive targeting, which from a algo requirement perspective does require I think 30 conversions within a 60-day window. I could be off. But again, we have some tools already in place that can support kind of that ease of deployment. And then optimize. Wait 2 weeks, look at the data, look at view throughs, what's really driving efficiencies within the business, and make those changes. In fact, you can even ask Copilot or Bing, does this, what do you think AI here? And then two, if you have a team associated with your account or your business, that's what we're here for. That's why they haven't replaced us with robots yet, because there still is that human element. But I think making sure you not only have the right bid strategy, but also day parting, I think, is also something that folks should consider. There's a lot of activity during the nights and weekends and all that great stuff, but typically conversions come during the day. Mobile, I think, from a omni-channel perspective is important, but based, depending on what you're actually selling, you might want to have that honest conversation with yourself and be like, is someone really going to buy my product on a mobile phone? Maybe not. So we do actually, in some cases, recommend do a negative bid modifier mobile, just a little bit, right? Because again, we are the PC, we are the workday consumer. And in general, data does support the notion that conversions come in kind of like a 10-hour window. So those are the things right out of the gate I would highly recommend. And then, what else? And then patience, right? So again, once you start, let's let it go for 2 weeks. Let's let the data kind of accumulate. Typically 2 weeks is the time period. And then what do you do first? Where's your first point of action? Drive efficiency. Scale, we have that. So if you need to tighten the reins a little bit in terms of day parting or even changing targeting, don't be afraid to do that. In fact, the one thing I will say right now is I don't ever recommend running a campaign without targeting on it. It will spend, and you will be like, it will probably take minutes. So make sure you're choosing your audience, because that's what the scale does, right? It gives us that ability to like whittle it down to just the right subset of folks that we want to reach. So those are kind of my recommendations for this month, if you will, and getting ready.
Great. Some fantastic fundamentals that I think apply really year round, but you're right, do them now as well, and set things up early, because you don't want to get started with these campaigns when all the shopping activity is in full swing. Build up that conversion data right now so that the automated systems understand what to bid on, how much to bid, when to spend it. And anything that you're going to do manually as far as day parting, kind of optimizations, geo optimizations, device type optimizations, you also need 2 weeks of data. And even if you spend a ton of money in like 1 or 2 days, like sure, you have a lot of data, but you don't have any insights into, hey, people behave differently on Sundays than they do on Tuesdays, right? So you really need at least 7 days at a very minimum.
Yeah.
And the more that we get into the Black Friday week, that data can never be used to make any decisions for other weeks of the year, because it's just going to be different, right? So
Yeah.
start doing it now.
Yeah, hold on tight for those days. And one more plug there too, and then we talked about it earlier, which is run the publisher report. It's unique to us. You can't do it in a lot of other platforms. Don't just look at the clicks, look at the conversions, look at the view through conversions, look at the ROI and the ROAS, and use that as sort of another sort of lever that you can pull. And again, we're running on a CPC, so don't be afraid to see or potentially your click through rate not be ideal. Let's focus on what folks are actually doing to kind of, again, to convert to action. That's where we want to be, kind of our mindset to be.
Great. And a shameless plug for Optimizer. We help support campaigns on Google, but also on Microsoft. And we go deep on all of these optimizations. So any of these things that Joe was talking about, we can help you do it more efficiently and to some degree automate it if you're ready for that level of automation. So with that, Joe, fantastic advice. Thanks for sharing everything you see inside of Microsoft that can help advertisers. How do people learn more and stay in touch with you?
Just head to Microsoft Advertising. Open your browser, go to Bing if you wanna, and perform a query. You'll find us, or again, reach out to your rep, or the traditional channels of support. We've got a lot of folks on hand to make sure our entire ecosystem of advertisers are ready, and I would love to see folks overwhelmed with questions and opportunities.
Yeah, and Microsoft Advertising has a great blog on there as well, so do check that out. They share very frequent updates about the industry. They have playbooks, usually by market, so wherever you are, they're going to have great data for you that kind of tells you what's happening in that region. And then, Joe, I think you're also on LinkedIn, so people can find you right there. Everyone who's enjoyed the show, please go ahead and subscribe so you get updates about future episodes. And you can find us at optimizer.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Joe, thanks for being on, and we'll see you for the next episode.
Thanks, Fred.